Out of control behavior, impulsivity, hustle culture, burnout. If you look at the headlines regarding CEOs and executives, you might think that the path to power requires a lack of restraint. We tend to assume that the leader in the room is the loudest one, the one making the snap decisions, or the one chasing the craziest stretch goals. But in this episode, we're turning that myth on its head. We're talking about the power of personal discipline. We aren't talking about grinding 80-hour weeks or being rigid. We're talking about self-control as the single most predictive behavior for ethical leadership, career advancement, and team performance. If you're a leader or you're waiting in the wings to become one, this data will change how you act tomorrow morning. And it all starts now on Engage and Inspire. Hello, leaders, and welcome back to another episode of Engage and Inspire. I am your host, Scott Liles. You know, when most people think about leadership, they picture the big moments, the keynote speeches, the turnaround strategy, the $1 million deal. But here's the truth that I've learned after years of studying and working with executives. Leadership isn't made in the big moments. It's made in the 5 seconds between a trigger and your response. Now, those 5 seconds is where personal discipline lives. And according to research, it's the single most underrated predictor of ethical leadership, team trust, and your own career trajectory. Now, today we're going to break down the data behind the power of personal discipline, why your character doesn't matter if you can't control your impulses, why stretch goals might actually be hurting your reputation, and how to build self-control without burning out. If you're a leader or you want to be one soon, you want to stick around and listen to this. This episode might save you from your next impulsive email. Now, let's start with a study that I honestly believe should be framed on a wall in every HR director's office. It comes from the Journal of Business Ethics. Researchers looked at 218 U.S. Air Force officers. They measured their character strengths, things like honesty, empathy, integrity, and morale courage. Then, separately, they asked their subordinates of those officers to rate how ethical and effective the officers were as leaders. Now, if you had to ask me before reading the study, I would have said, of course, the kindest, most honest officer will be seen as the best leader. Makes sense, right? But the data tells a completely different story. The researchers found that self-control was the moderator. In fact, it was the single most important factor for leadership effectiveness. But here's the kicker. Leaders who had high character, lots of empathy, high morale reasoning, but low self-control were not seen as ethical leaders by their team. Not one bit. Why is that? Well, it's because their empathy and honesty didn't matter if they couldn't regulate their impulse in real time. So think about it. A leader who genuinely cares about people but yells under pressure or makes impulsive decisions or plays favorites when they're tired, that leader is not experienced as good. They're experienced as unpredictable. And unpredictability destroys trust faster than malice ever could. So the takeaway there is self-control is the bridge between who you want to be as a leader and who your team actually sees you as. Without discipline, your character doesn't get a chance to shine. So here's my question for you to sit with. Is there a gap between your intentions and your reactions? If your team judged you only on your most impulsive moment of the week, what would they say? All right, now let's talk about ambition, because I know many of you listening are high achievers. You love the stretch goals. You were told early in your career to shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. But research suggests that might be terrible leadership advice. Now, this comes from the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Researchers ran 7 different experiments with roughly 3,500 participants. They wanted to understand how self-control signals power and competence. Now, here's one experiment I want you to picture. Participants were asked to evaluate 2 people who each set a reading goal for the week. Person A said, I'm going to read 50 pages. Person B said, I'm going to read 200 pages. At the end of the week, guess what happened? They both read exactly 100 pages. Same output, same effort, different results. But when observers asked who seems more powerful, who seems more competent, who would you want as a leader? The answer was overwhelming. Person A, the modest goal setter who surpassed their goal. Not by a little, by a landslide. Why? Because failing to meet an ambitious goal, even if your absolute output is the same as someone else's, signals a lack of self-control. Observers don't just see the outcome, they see the gap between your promise and your delivery. And that gap erodes trust and perceived competence. Let me pause here because this is counterintuitive for many leaders. All right. We think if I set a huge goal and get 80% there, that's a win. But the research says no. To outsiders, you look like someone who can't predict or control their own performance. Now, for the soon-to-be leaders that are listening, stop publicly setting stretch goals that you know are a long shot. It doesn't look ambitious. It looks undisciplined. Set a realistic goal. Over-deliver. That's how you signal readiness for leadership. And for the current leaders, when you set team stretch goals that are impossible, you aren't motivating people. You're teaching them that your world is unreliable. Now, that's not leadership. That's wishful thinking with a title. So now we've established that self-control is critical. But let's be honest, we're all human. We all get tired, we get stressed, we get hangry, we lose focus in those 3 p.m. meetings that should have been an email. Now the question is, how do we build this muscle without burning out? This is where the 2024 data gets really exciting. A systematic review published in Management Review Quarterly looked at self-leadership and mindfulness training across dozens of studies. Now, here's what they found. Training in self-leadership competencies, things like self-goal setting, self-reward, self-cueing, improves stress resilience, job performance, and crucially, a leader's ability to organize and motivate their teams. But the specific finding I want to highlight is this. Mindfulness training was strongly linked to self-regulation. It reduced burnout, it improved emotional regulation, and it increased what researchers call value congruent action, meaning you actually do what you say you believe in. Now, let me read you a direct quote from the review. By combining the motivational, performance-related benefits of self-leadership with the benefits of mindfulness, leaders can become more aware of and more able to control their emotions, behaviors, and ideas. These mindful self-leaders can consciously choose courses of actions that are in line with their values. Pretty interesting, right? Discipline isn't about white-knuckling through the day. That's a recipe for exhaustion and eventual explosion. Real discipline is about awareness. It's about noticing the impulse, pausing, and choosing a response instead of being hijacked by a reaction. If you aren't practicing some form of mindfulness, even just 5 minutes of deep breathing before a stressful meeting, you're leading with a handicap. You're leaving power on the table, and your team pays the price. Okay, let's take a quick break to recommend something that my wife absolutely loves. She spent years in boring, ill-fitting activewear that made her feel fine. Not great, just fine. Then she found Wear Playground at wearplayground.com, and her whole confidence shifted. Playground makes luxurious activewear for women. Bold prints, sustainable fabrics, limited edition collections designed in New York City and made in LA. My wife says it actually fits, breathes, and looks beautiful, whether she's at the gym or running errands and grabbing a cup of coffee. Google reviewers agree, with one reviewer saying, "Finally, activewear that makes me feel unstoppable." So if you're tired of bland workout gear, or if you're a guy wanting to get something great for the woman in your life, head to wearplayground.com. I got you 20% off any product, exclusive to my listeners. So use my promo code HELM, that's HELM, at checkout. So full disclosure, I do earn a commission on this when you use the code, but that supports the show. And honestly, I only recommend what actually works in my own home. So check them out at wearplayground.com. Okay, now let's get practical here. We have the data from the Air Force. We have the UC San Diego experiment. We have the 2024 Mindfulness Review. But how does a leader actually apply this on a Monday morning? Here are 3 specific strategies that you can start tomorrow. Now, strategy 1 is the pre-commitment strategy. If you struggle with self-control in meetings where you're interrupting or you're checking your phone, or you may even zone out, you cannot rely on willpower in the moment. Willpower is like a phone battery. It drains. It needs to be charged. So you must charge your environment. Here's what pre-commitment looks like. Before a meeting, write down on the piece of paper that you take notes with, "I will not interrupt until 3 people have spoken." Put your phone in a drawer. Don't put it face down on the table. Put it away. Block your calendar for deep work and turn off all notifications so you don't get distracted and you don't zone out. The famous UCLA basketball coach John Wooden called self-control the 6th player on the court. He didn't hope his players had discipline. He drilled their environment, every practice, every drill, every routine, until they had no choice but to act with control. And you can do the same thing. Now, the second strategy is the modest goal reset. So what I want you to do is look at your Q3 or Q4 goals right now and be honest. If you're already 50% behind on your stretch goal, you're not inspiring anyone. You're actually eroding your team's trust in your judgment and discipline. So reset the goal. Yes, you can reset it. Call it a revised forecast if that feels better. It flows a little more smoothly for you. But set something achievable and then crush it. It's better to win a small race by 20% than to tie for 14th place in a marathon you were never going to finish. Over-delivery is a disciplined signal. Under-delivery on a crazy goal is just noise. Now, the third strategy is the 5-minute reflection. Researchers at Fisher College of Business suggest leaders ask themselves 2 questions at the end of each day. Not 20, 2. Question 1 is, how well did I manage my impulsive thoughts or behaviors with others today? And the second question is, how well did I model the values that matter to my workplace? That's it. 5 minutes. Write down 1 win and 1 miss. Why does it work? Because self-control is contagious. When the leader shows restraint under pressure, when you pause before firing off that angry email, when you admit you need to think before deciding, you give your team psychological safety to do the same. You're not weak when you pause. You're signaling stability. And in a chaotic world that we live in today, stability is the most attractive leadership trait there is. Now, let me tell you a quick story. Early in my career, I worked with an absolutely amazing VP. She was brilliant, strategically sharp, cared deeply about her people, but she had one flaw. She answered emails immediately. She answered them while she was at dinner, in the middle of the night, during one-on-ones. She even answered emails one point while someone was in her office crying. She thought this made her responsive. Her team saw it as disrespectful and chaotic. They didn't trust her because she was always reacting and she was never present. One day, her career coach gave her a simple rule: no emails before 10 a.m., no phone meetings, and nothing after you have clocked out for the day. She struggled for 2 weeks. Her people got mad, but then all of a sudden, something shifted. Her team started bringing her better problems, not just urgent noise. Her decision quality improved, and within 90 days, her team's trust scores went up 40%. She didn't change her character. She didn't suddenly become a kinder person. She just added one discipline, and it changed everything. That's the power we're talking about today. All right, I've rambled on long enough. It's time to wrap this thing up. We live in a reactive world. The leader who reacts emotionally, chases every shiny object, overpromises and underdelivers, that leader is viewed as weak. Not by their title, by their biology, by their team's instincts, by the research. The data here is clear. Self-control is not repression, it's power. It's the mechanism that turns your good intentions into ethical actions. It's the signal that tells your team, I'm stable, I'm capable, you can trust me. And it's the quiet superpower that separates soon-to-be leaders from leaders who stay stuck. So here's your challenge for this week. Pick one impulse to master. Maybe it's checking your phone during a meeting or a one-on-one. Maybe it's adding 3 extra tasks to your to-do list when you're already overloaded. Maybe it's interrupting your direct report before they finish their 3rd sentence. Regulate that one thing. Just one. Prove to your team and prove to yourself that you have control. Because leadership isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the most intentional person in the room. And intention starts with discipline. Thank you for listening to the Engage and Inspire podcast. If you found this episode valuable, send it to a colleague who needs to hear it. Send it to a family member, a friend. Let's share this podcast with everyone that you can think of, especially the ones who love stretch goals just a little too much. Hit follow so you don't miss our next episode. And I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, wearplayground.com. Go check them out and remember, HELM at checkout for your discount. Until next time, remember, keep engaging and keep inspiring. Take care.